We currently have a $20 trillion debt. And you might ask yourself, whose fault is it? Republicans or Democrats? The easy answer is both. Both parties are equally responsible, equally culpable, and equally guilty of ignoring the debt, ignoring the spending problem, and really, I think, allowing our country to rot from the inside out. This year, the debt will be $700 billion. The deficit will be $700 billion for just 1 year for our country, $700 billion. We borrow about $1 million a minute. Under George W. Bush, the debt went from $5 trillion to $10 trillion. Under President Obama, it went from $10 trillion to $20 trillion. It's doubling under Republicans and Democrats. So right now, we're in the midst of another spending frenzy. Now, people will say, well, we're spending the money for something good. We're going to help those in Puerto Rico and those in Texas and those in Florida. My point is if you're going to spend money to help someone in need, maybe we should take it from another area of spending that's less in need. I think that just simply borrowing it, even for something that you can argue is compassionate, is really foolhardy and may make us weaker as a nation. Admiral Mullins put it this way. He said that the number one threat to our national security is our debt. In fact, most people who follow world politics, while we do have problems around the world, don't really see us being invaded anytime soon by an army or an armada. But people do see the burden of debt. So what we have before us is a bill, $36 billion. Much of it's going to Puerto Rico and Texas and Florida. My request is very simple. We should pay for it. About a month ago, we had $15 billion for the same purposes. We are set, in all likelihood, to have over $100 billion spent on these hurricanes. I simply ask that we take it from some spending item that seems to be less pressing. I mean, we could go through a list of hundreds and hundreds of items, but one thing I would think that we could start with why don't we quit sending money to countries that burn our flag? So if you are a country and you are saying death to America, burning the American flag, maybe we shouldn't give you any money. We give money to Pakistan. We trade and sell arms with most of the Middle East that don't like us. And we do this with borrowed money. We don't even have the money we're sending. But we could make the burden a little less if we would say, you know what, let's don't give any money to countries that hate us, to any country that's burning our flag. In Pakistan, there's a Christian woman by the name of Asia Bibi. She's been on death row for 5 years for being a Christian. She went to the well to draw water, and the women of the village began chanting, "Death, death to the Christian." As she was being beaten and pummeled on the ground and thought she was going to die, the police finally show up, and they thought they were there to rescue her. They were there to imprison her. They took her off to prison. That was 5 years ago. Not easy being a Christian in the Middle East. In Pakistan, there was a doctor who helped us to get bin Laden. His name is Afridi. He's been in jail now for about 5-6 years also. So he helped get us information that helped us to target bin Laden and finally get this great enemy of our country. The Pakistanis put him in jail for helping us. The Pakistanis help us one day and stab us in back the next day. The Taliban, when they were defeated under President Obama, when he put 100,000 troops in there, they scurried off into Pakistan, they have a sanctuary, and then they come back. I think we ought to think twice about sending money to countries that burn our flag, sending money to countries that persecute Christians, sending monies to countries that frankly don't even like us. We spend about $30 billion helping other countries. Well, you know, if you were going to help your neighbor, if your neighbor was without food, would you first feed your children? If you had a little money left over, help the children next door? That's what most people would do. If you're going to give money to your church or your synagogue, would you go to the bank and borrow the money to give to somebody? Would that be compassionate or foolhardy? Is it compassionate to borrow money to give it to someone else? So people here will say they have great compassion and they want to help the people of Puerto Rico and the people of Texas and the people of Florida. But notice they have great compassion with someone else's money. Ask them if they're giving any money to Puerto Rico. Ask them if they're giving money to Texas. Ask them what they're doing to help their fellow man. And you'll find often that it's easy to be compassionate with someone else's money. But it's not only that. It's not only compassion with someone else's money. It's compassion with money that doesn't even exist, money that's borrowed. Of the $20 trillion we owe, China holds $1 trillion of that. And all this might be said, and you might say, well, we just have to help people. You're worrying too much, and you have to talk about details, and really all the money's being well spent. Well, if you look back at money that's been spent before in disasters, guess what? People replace everything, including things that weren't broken. I remember in Katrina, a family that was holed up in a beachside resort for weeks, taxpayer money. They could have put them up across the street for about $60 or $50 a night. They were staying in a $400 a night beachside resort with government money, with FEMA money. I think we have to look at how well government spends money. You want an example of how well government spends money? Last year, we had some great science. There's a lot of great taxpayer-funded science going on. They wanted to study whether or not Neil Armstrong, when he set foot on the moon, whether he said one small step for mankind or whether he said one small step for a man. So it's either one small step for man or one small step for a man. They wanted to know if the preposition a was in there. So they took some money that was actually intended for a good purpose to study autism, and they studied Neil Armstrong's statement when he landed on the moon, $700,000. In the NIH last year, they spent $2 million studying whether or not if someone in front of you in the buffet line sneezes on the food, are you more or less likely to eat the food that's been sneezed on? I think we could have polled the audience on that one. They spent $300,000 studying whether Japanese quail are more sexually promiscuous on cocaine. I think we could probably just assume yes. This kind of stuff goes on year after year. You think, oh, those are aberrations, that's new. William Proxmire was a senator, a conservative Democrat back in the day, and he used to do something called the Golden Fleece Award. He would put out these awards. They sound exactly the same as the stuff we're finding now. We spent money studying the gambling habits of Ugandans. We've studied how to prepare the Philippines for climate change. You name it, we're studying it around the world with money we don't have. I mean, if you wanted to make the argument, oh, we're running a surplus, we're a great country, we're going to help all the other countries of the world, I would actually listen to you if we're running a surplus. But we're not. We're running a $700 billion debt. We borrow $1 million a minute. And we got a lot of rich people here. You know what we ought to do is ask these rich senators, what are you giving to Puerto Rico? What are you giving to Texas? Instead, they're giving your money. They're really not even giving your money. They're giving money they borrowed. So what am I asking? Not that we not do this. What I'm asking is that, well, why don't we take it from something we shouldn't be doing? Or why don't we try to conserve? So if you decided you wanted to help the people next door, you might say, you know, I'm not going to the movie theater. I'm not going to go to the Broadway play. I'm not going to the NFL game. I'm going to save money by cutting back on my expenses so that I can help the people next door that are struggling, the father or mother out of work, and they need my help. But you wouldn't go to the bank and ask for a loan to help people. That's not the way it works. Unless you're a government, and then common sense goes out the window, and you just spend money right and left because you're compassionate. You've got a big heart because you've got the ability of the Federal Reserve just to print up more money.